faces a lot of opposition and also has to learn how to make sense of the gospel to these new people. And often that first person, that first generation of missionaries, it can feel so frustrating. And yet they stayed there, they worked at it, and the next generations, there would be some real fruit that would come out of that. But it often was the fruit was very small. The apparent fruit was very small in the first generation. But anyway, so there have been these ups and downs all throughout history. Tonight, I'm going to keep my focus on the West. We're Westerners, and this is where we live. And this is also where a lot of the trouble for Christianity is occurring. This is where Christianity, which used to be the majority, maybe a majority of people in the West still claim to be Christians, but that is going down very fast. That identification, self-identification as Christians. So that's a downer. We're in the West that used to be so apparently Christian. That is changing drastically. But there's another side to this upside, and it comes out of that missionary effort that was done in the 19th and 20th centuries. And the church is really lively in Asia and in Africa. And I don't know this personally from experience, but I think also in South America. And so another irony is that as we Westerners, as we people in Europe and North America, so many of us turn away from God. People are coming from Asia and Africa. They're coming to the West, and they're being missionaries. When I was in, I think the biggest church in Paris is led by an African who was from one of the French colonies, and so he spoke French, and he's come to Paris and has started, I think, the biggest church in Paris. And I was in Cologne, Germany, years ago, and I experienced the same thing there. There was a very large church that a friend of mine went to that was the leadership came from an African Christian who had moved to Germany. So things look negative in the West, but there's also really some positive things that are happening. So let's not lose track of that. So I think we're at a particular low point, and we heard, that during the devotional that we have lots of freedom, and we're not being persecuted, and this is true. But for some reason, even at this point when there's nothing to fear, so many people are abandoning the claim that they are Christian. Why might this be happening? Well, something we should think about recognize is that we live in a small bubble. I'm thinking of us now as Anabaptists. We live in a small Anabaptist bubble, and that's not a bad thing. We have a culture. It shapes us, but we also every time there's a little bubble, it's in a bigger bubble, and so our small Anabaptist bubble, which, like I say, gives us a sense of who we are and helps shape us. It's also in the big secular bubble. And that big secular bubble is alluring. It draws us in certain ways. And it also tries to influence us. So we on our own get drawn to the larger culture, and the larger culture tries to make us be like they are. And it can be very subtle, this influence that comes from the secular world. It can be so subtle and gentle that we hardly notice it, and that changes happen slowly, but they may be in a very negative direction. And eventually, I want to talk about some of these influences. This slow and gradual change has happened in the past for some of us Anabaptists. I think of the Dutch Anabaptist Church, the church that Menno would have helped found. That was a very, very successful church, grew very large, and once they were no longer persecuted, the people started to prosper. They took the biblical exhortation to do what your hand finds, to do it as to the Lord. They became very successful in whatever they chose to do. And over time, it seems like, well, they became very wealthy. Now, whether that is the reason for their downfall or not, it's hard. It's perhaps impossible to say for sure. However, the Dutch church, as it prospered, started to become much more like the people around them. And if you're like the people around you, there's really no reason to have this special identity, which included things like non-resistance. And so the Dutch church gradually lost its distinctives, its concept that we are a separated people, a people who are to live in holiness, and we're a non-resistant people. And when that happened, the numbers tumbled rather quickly. I think they're probably at the peak. This would have been back in like 1700 or so. There were maybe 200,000 Dutch members of the Anabaptist Church. So that means the community would have been larger than that. But nowadays, I don't know if they're even 7,000. And they are they're theologically very liberal. They have basically been absorbed by that greater society around them. So even though they're still in a particular church that would identify as Mennonite or Anabaptist, there's really not that much that distinguishes them from their neighbors. So I want to talk about the allurements that are out there. That's what we want to look at tonight. So what's our world like, our contemporary world? And so I'm thinking both about the people in the church and the people outside the church. What are the things that are affecting people deeply nowadays? The first things I want to talk about are things that have always been a struggle for the church, or at least a potential struggle. And so one of them is affluence or wealth. And we've never, the United States or the Western world has never been as wealthy as it is today. And because of that, more and more people live their lives the way they want to. They feel like they don't have a need to be connected to other people. They can live independently without caring about what anybody else thinks. Our society emphasizes prosperity. And in fact, I think most people, they might not verbalize it this way, but most people think of prosperity as the most important thing. And I've read that when people vote, that's what they vote on, whether this person or this person will be better for my financial situation. So the world itself has never been more wealthy, and we haven't either. And so I think there are going to be some effects that we have to be aware of. Wealth itself is not necessarily evil, but it does seem like it has some kind of power in it. And I think that's why Jesus warned about mammon. Now, mammon is simply the word that the people of his place or his time and place would have used for wealth, but it was also the name of a god. And so when Jesus said you can't serve God and mammon, he was basically saying that wealth is an idol, and it has the power to draw us. It's a very powerful thing. And so Jesus said you can't have two masters. You're going to love one and hate the other. And so wealth, as I read that passage, wealth has some kind of power on us, and wealth tries to convince us that we need to serve it so that it can serve us and God. And that's a fallacy. Um, when we start to serve mammon, we may tell ourselves that we are going to use the wealth we get to serve God. But, and I'm not saying no one ever does that. I think people do that. But it's a real struggle for a lot of people. And it's something we have to be aware of, but also in our world in general. So I was basically speaking about believers up to this point. But our Western world, that is what motivates people, to have as much money as possible with as little work as possible. And so we are the wealthiest society that has ever existed, and we have to take that into consideration as we consider our own lives, and also as we think about how we're going to look at the world around us and approach the people in the world around us. A second issue that is a big thing is mobility. And I don't know if you've ever thought about this before, but as we have more and more wealth, it's easy for us to move where we want to and when we want to. And that in and of itself isn't necessarily wrong either. In fact, the very fact that we have this wealth often enables someone to go as a missionary someplace. That's really good. But I'm thinking about how we can lose our roots as we're wealthy, and as we can without much trouble pick up and go wherever we want to go. We start to lose our roots, and our roots are really important. I'm not saying that there's not a time for people to move, but I think, especially in the United States, there something like 20% of the people move every year, which is amazing. Uh, it's an amazing number, but that's going to destroy roots. I know that we live in communities, and we often are very closely related to each other, and we have these graveyards that have lots and lots of Millers and Yoders and whatever other name. Where I came from, I went to the Catholic church, the graveyard at the Catholic church from where my ancestors would have come from. And it was the same thing. There were all these names that were Catholic, English Catholic names, and those people lived there for hundreds of years, and they had a community, and they had roots, and they knew who they were. But that is practically gone. And it's important that we're losing these connections. Now, I hope we're not in that situation as badly as most people are. But connections, whether it's your family, it's connections with your family, or connections with your work, the people that you work with, or connections with friends, they give stability. It's because of those kinds of connections that we have we can get valuable input from family, friends, coworkers about struggles we're having, or about an issue in our life. But as you move around and uproot yourself, that's going to be harder. Sure, you can reestablish roots wherever you move, but that is going to be it's going to take some time. And once again, I'm not saying that a person should never do this, but when we do just move around a lot, I think we one thing that I think is really significant is we don't have as good friendships as we used to have. Jesus had 3 special friends. Then he had 12 other, well, he had 9 other friends, and he had a group of people that traveled with him. Those were there were he had friends at different levels, but he wouldn't have called everyone a friend. And if Jesus needed that, if he needed Peter, James, and John as close friends, if Jesus needed that, we need that too. And when we when we lose our roots, that's a whole lot harder to do, to have that kind of connection. From my own life, I can testify that having close friends, it's hard. You can't have a lot of close friends, but having close friends makes a difference. At least it has in my life. When I have gotten down or in trouble, my friends have stood with me, and I've come out at the right place. When we don't have that, it's a lot harder to come out at the right place. So we are we are definitely the most mobile society ever. Another issue that I want to think about that is something that's been around for a while is individualism and commitment. And this was something that was we talked about how the Anabaptists expected a full commitment. This wasn't just a thing you say, yeah, this sounds good, I'm going to do this. Now, of course, the society, because they were killing the Anabaptists, helped with this concept of commitment. But one of the things we saw was that for the Anabaptist church, commitment is one of the key things. And in our world, we have, as we've lost connections, as we've moved around, we have become more individualistic. And I would say Americans are probably some of the most individualistic people in the world. And we tend to think, who are you to tell me what I'm supposed to do? I will figure that out for myself. And as we do this, as we get further and further apart, as we have less or fewer deep friendships, I think that we lose the connection that gives us access to wisdom. If we've got good friends, if there's stability in them, and we live close to them for a long period of time, we've got people that we can talk to and find out, what should I do at this point in my life? Now, as we become more individualistic, we also lose this concept of commitment. And we want to be totally unfettered. I don't want, and I've talked to my students, and this is a thing for them. It's harder for them to commit, I think, than it has been in the relatively recent past. I think they're being influenced by the general society's lack of desire to commit. And we see that in so many different places, so many different ways. But commitment is absolutely necessary for a real and healthy community. If you don't have commitment, there may seem to be a community, but as soon as something is done or said that you don't like, I'm out of here. That's not really community. It's not really healthy. One of the things that a community requires is that we allow ourselves to be bound to it. And this is actually, this sounds scary to most Westerners. I don't want to be bound to anything. And without that being bound together, without that commitment, you do not experience life the way you should. You don't have the full fruitfulness of life if you aren't committed the way you should. And the early Anabaptists recognized that, and their lives were fruitful, even though sometimes they were short because of this commitment that they made to the church. Now, if you just want to think about this a little bit, where are the fruitful relationships? Where do we really experience fruitfulness? And just think about it. Marriage, friendships, any kind of community, any kind of cooperative activity. Maybe a work bee, clubs, hobbies that are shared with others, even playing games. And we're getting further and further away from those things. And these are just common everyday things. not even talking about something that's specifically spiritual. But our society has become more individualistic. It has become afraid of commitment, and we are the loneliest society in the world. Just the other day, I was reading in a magazine, and it was giving figures about how how few hours people spend together with each other, how more and more people complain about loneliness, and it's something that is really affecting lives. The last thing that I want to talk about that's been a common thing. Then I want to look at a few things that are more recent developments. But the last one I want to look at that's been around a while is politics, and specifically, I'm going to talk a little bit about Christian nationalism. As we lose the connections, as we pull apart from each other, and so I'm talking about America in general or the West in general, but it could happen to us too. As we are no longer as committed to each other and tied together as we used to be, we want something that we can say binds us. We don't like that word bind, but anyway, we want something that connects us. The word religion actually in Latin means the thing that connects us. And really, religion is meant to be the thing that connects us. But we see that in the West, people are abandoning Christianity. And so, as they abandon that, as they abandon Christianity, they still want some degree of connectedness. And so, what's been happening? I think that people are starting to look to politics as the important thing. Now, think about it. If affluence or wealth is important to most Americans, and if that's why they vote the way they do, well, it makes sense that as you lose your contact or your conception of God and as someone that I should honor and worship, and that I should be part of a Christian community, as you lose that, you start to look for something else, and politics makes a lot of sense. I can influence the world around me, and especially I can influence it or try to influence it so that my wealth is taken care of, so I don't lose my wealth. But there's an irony here as well. People don't agree on what good politics would be or what good governance would be. And so as we lose our religion and we start to put our focus on politics, we're going to start having a lot of contention. Uh, and that's what we see happening in our society. Um, I I've always been interested in what's happening politically, and I think back to the '80s when I would have been in my 30s, and there were political differences back then, but the different parties talked to each other and even joked sometimes, and sometimes they got a little heated, but nothing like today. And today, if you're in the other party, you're an enemy. You're an evil person. You're trying to do things that are really bad. And so, yes, this becoming political can give a person some sense of connection, but it's also adding, as there are two very different views that are at odds with each other, it also adds to the contention or the fighting that happens, and people are this is discouraging in the long run, I would say. Also, I want us to think about something here, this Christian nationalism. Some of our people have been influenced by this. My sister and her husband are really politically active, and they know what I think and they know why. And when Mr. Trump ran the first time for president, we were together on vacation, and I was staying in their RV. And my sister said, I know what you believe. I know what you think. But would you please, just this one time, vote for Mr. Trump? And I said no. But anyway, but that was really desperately important to her. But a lot of our people have gotten pulled into that. And I have no idea what it's like here. But anyway, later, after that, my sister asked that. Later on, we were talking on the phone, and she said, I saw a rally on TV in a place called Litz, Pennsylvania. Well, she meant Lidditz. And she said, and there were all these Amish people behind him cheering him on. And so it's like, oh no, because she knows I've told them that we Anabaptists really don't vote. We shouldn't vote and we shouldn't take part in politics or government. And she was wondering what's going on there. And that's influencing some of us. I think we're looking for solutions in the wrong place. The politics isn't going to bring the kinds of solutions we should be working for. And the term Christian nationalism is an oxymoron. An oxymoron is when you put two or more words together and they contradict each other. So a Christian is someone who should love anyone, including his enemy. And it doesn't matter if he's from a different political party or a different nationality. A nationalist is someone who says, my country, right or wrong. This is what matters. And those two things just don't go together. And yet some of our people are getting pulled into that. We've thought a little bit about affluence, mobility, individualism and commitment, and politics and Christian nationalism. And just to wrap that up, we accumulate wealth. We are losing our roots. We drive more and more wedges of loneliness into our lives. We make secondary things like politics into first things. We don't love as we should. And some of us have really lost our way, and we have to think about this. And I just wanted to stop here for a moment and see if you have anything you wanted to say about these things. These are things that the world have always been an issue in the world. They've always affected us to some degree. So do you have anything you want to say about these things? Or maybe something else that's been just as prevalent, but I haven't brought up?
You mentioned that you would feel we're at a particularly low point.
Yeah?
And I want to disagree with that, but I'm curious what makes you think that way.
What I'm going to say next. In other words, the new things that we're facing, I think these old things are becoming, partly because of what I'm going to talk about next, are becoming bigger than they ever were before. But they're there, and we need to think about them. So I'm glad you asked that question, but I'll get into that. Just wait a second more to see if somebody else has something you want to say. And thanks for saying that. I think both nights that I was here and had a meal, somebody asked a question at the meal that I wish they would have asked in the meeting. So don't feel shy. Okay, well, let's get into this other side of things. These things that I've mentioned, they've been around a long time, and they've affected the general population. They've affected the church to some degree. But there's some new things, or at least new aspects of things that I think affect us and make the situation we're in particularly more dangerous, I think, than it's been. I mentioned one day that the early church faced a really big challenge with something called Gnosticism. And Gnosticism said that the spiritual is the only good thing, the physical is bad. And if the church had been drawn into that kind of belief, the church would be totally different. It would have lost one of the truths of God. God made this world and he made it good. Yes, it's fallen, but he wants to redeem it, and he is redeeming it. And that's because it's still good. It's still something he wants to redeem. In the 19th century, there was a new kind of Gnosticism. Now, and when I first read about this, I was kind of confused because the original Gnosticism says the spiritual is good, the physical is bad. And then some modern Christian philosophers were talking about a new kind of Gnosticism from the 19th century on. And the connection they made was that the old Gnosticism said that the spiritual alone is good, and so we should only focus on the spiritual. These new Gnostics are saying, and you could use another word if you wanted to, you could call them materialists, because these new Gnostics are saying the only thing that's real is the material, the physical. Who are some of the big names that say there is nothing spiritual? The only thing that's real is the physical. Can you tell me some names from the 19th century, especially, that have affected us right till today? Who are some of the thinkers that said there is nothing spiritual? It's all physical. Darwin, good. Who else? Darwin is very good. I mean, it's a good name to pick out there. How about yes?
Would Stephen Hawking be there as well?
He would be in there because he is an atheist, and these people they only believe in the material, so they're atheists as well. But he doesn't. I'm thinking of names like Darwin that have made the Western world start to think differently than it ever did before. I think I would see Hawkins as just kind of part of what's happening. Who is somebody with economics and politics that has flipped everything on its head and says the world is only material? Marx, exactly. Okay, so we've got Darwin, we've got Marx. I'll give the next two. These four men are they were all in the 1800s, sorry, and they affected their time and our time. Marx and Darwin and Freud, who would have said that humans are just sexual beings, and a guy named Nietzsche that you may not have heard of, but he is the person that said God is dead, and you Westerners, you Western Christians killed him. And so we have to abandon Christian morality, and we have to just look for, each one of us has to just be as strong as we can be and just do whatever we want to do. In other words, we all have to become supermen and not listen to anybody else's opinion. And these four men have really influenced us. Marx said that you should work as much as you can and only take what you need. This is actually a Christian heresy. We should work as hard as we can. We should give as much as we can. But he wanted to force it on everyone. And out of this came communism and the communist revolutions and wars and lots of deaths. So Marx thought humans are simply economic machines, nothing spiritual. Darwin, actually Marx really liked when Darwin's book came out about evolution, because Marx said, now I have a proof that there's no God. Because Darwin said that we are just simply the most advanced animal, and that this advancement or change comes with no direction, and it just happens because of length of time. And so as time goes on, there are little differences in the offspring, and eventually a different kind of creature comes out. And Darwin made it very clear. This just happens. It's time and chance. There is no directing hand. And Marx liked that because that means there's no God. So for Darwin, we're just an animal. For Freud, the thing that makes everyone do whatever he does is our sexual nature. And then Nietzsche said, you just have to fight your way through and be the person you want to be, and don't let anybody and any kind of morality slow you down there. And these men have they've influenced immensely how people think, even how Christians think. Then another, so that's one issue. This new way of thinking that the only thing that's real is the material. And I don't think any of you think that, but do you ever make decisions just based on the material, on the physical reality, and not about what God thinks or what's spiritual? Think about it. I'm not saying you do. I just say think about that. Another thing I have I have one, two, three more things I want to say that I think are especially dangerous, and they're new. So from the 1800s, we got these new ideas, and they tried to present themselves scientifically, and so they really became powerful. People said, this must be true. They have a scientific way of talking, and so it must be true. In the 20th century, the Western world moved towards something called an open society. And this is where modern Western man decided that society doesn't need any kind of religion, philosophy, orthodoxy to give it direction. We're just going to let anyone think whatever they want to. The open society is, let's not have norms or rules. Let's just let everybody do whatever he wants to. Anything is allowed. And I don't know if you older ones remember this or not, but when I would have been in high school, one of the big mottos was do your own thing. And that's exactly what the open society is about. Do your own thing. Now, if there's one limit, it might be don't hurt anybody, but do your own thing. This is not possible. This is absolutely impossible. No society has ever existed for any length of time that didn't have something undergirding it, some kind of vision, some kind of religion, some kind of philosophy. And so, but in the West, we're saying, let's just let people believe and do whatever they want to. Well, we have reached the end point of that, which is chaos in our society. And just as an example of this, the last Supreme Court justice who was put on the Supreme Court bench is Justice Brown Jackson. And when she was being questioned by the Senate for them to decide if they were going to vote for her, one of the senators asked, "Can you tell me what a woman is?" And this Brown Jackson is a woman, and she said she couldn't. This is where our society has gotten. That things that it never questioned, that no society ever questioned before. There's some obvious things about what makes a person a man or what makes a person a woman. But our society has become open, and we say we can't define that. It's a thing that depends on you. You decide for yourself what that all means. And because we've done this, and we're starting to have so much chaos. Those people that promoted open society are now starting to try to impose their own new morality. And I don't know if you pay much attention to things like the political world, but the cancel culture and wokeism are two big things where the open society is now being pushed in the direction of we're going to have a new morality. And so new things, not Christian things, are going to be the new morality. And one of the big places this shows up is in the next issue that I see is human nature, human morality, and human sexuality. And this is the whole question. What does it mean to be a human? And that's something I want to talk about tomorrow. What does it mean to be a human? But right now, our society has come to the place where we don't know. And so we have people who are men taking part in women's sports, and something that would have even just 5, maybe 10 years ago would have been a shock. But now it's almost, if you argue against it, you're going to be called a person who's prejudiced or something very bad. And anyway, there is a definite human nature. Everyone recognizes. I don't care what society you were in. I don't care what religion you had. Everyone recognized this up until very recently. And the place where it's not recognized is in this very open society that exists in the West, in Europe, and in North America. And one of the things about being a human is that we're made in the image of God. And I can hardly think of anything sadder than when someone says he doesn't know what it means to be a human and is missing this beautiful thing that we are made in the image of God. We are damaged, but we can turn to Jesus, and he starts to repair us and make that image of God renewed in us. And the world is abandoning that. They're just sending that off and saying it doesn't make any sense to us. About 100 years ago, G.K. Chesterton, who is one of my favorite authors, said this: "The next great heresy is going to be simply an attack on morality, and especially on sexual morality. And it is coming, not from a few socialists, but from the exuberant energy of the rich who are resolved to enjoy themselves at last." And I think he had in mind the really rich, and that's true. But we Americans, we're all rich compared to the world. And so I think the whole of American and European society is doing what he's talking about, giving up, attacking morality, especially sexual morality. He goes on to say that the rich they're resolved to enjoy themselves at last, and neither popery, in other words, Catholicism, nor Puritanism, in other words, Protestantism, nor socialism will hold them back. The roots of this new heresy, God knows, are as deep as nature itself, whose flower is the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eye, and the pride of life. I say that the man who cannot see this coming, cannot see the signs of the times. And he has a little bit more, but I think that's, one more thing he says. He says, the madness of tomorrow is not coming from Moscow. He wrote this after the Russian Revolution. So Russia was a communist country, and people were afraid. They thought communism is going to take over the world. And he's saying that is not the real threat. The real threat is coming from inside of us. He says it's Manhattan, it's not Moscow, where the problem is festering and is going to affect all of us. And the last thing I want to talk about, as far as a new threat, is science and technology. And I don't know which one of these is most important, but the changes in science and technology are multiplying the other issues, I think. So there's been a scientific revolution ever since the 1500s. It hasn't ever stopped or slowed down. In fact, it's getting quicker. It's moving quicker and quicker. And it's delving deeper and deeper into nature and understanding it better than ever before, including what makes a person go, what makes a person what he is. And so there's some really good sides to that. But this also gives us the opportunity to manipulate and control nature more than we ever did. Maybe that's good. Maybe in some cases it's good. It also gives us the opportunity to manipulate and control our own nature, even though many people would say there is no such thing. Well, in fact, that kind of helps with trying to control what I am. Because if I don't have a human nature, then I can just choose to change it as I wish. Some people are seeking. I'm just going to give a few examples of what's happening. Some people are seeking eternal life, and I'm not kidding. There are people who are rich and are freezing their bodies as soon as they die, with the hope that when 20 years down the road, whatever killed them is the science figures out how to cure it, then they'll be thawed and they'll be cured. There's a man who's really rich, and he is doing everything under the sun, and he says it publicly, to try to live forever. And some of these people maybe don't think the human body can go on forever, but they're trying to learn ways to download their mind into a computer. All these things are happening. And it's because of all this, the new discoveries in science, and also because of the ability to use technology to do things we never could before. Well, one more thing about the technology. The new technology includes things like the internet, social media, and the cell phone that have changed us in ways we hardly recognize. I read people who are not Christian at all, and they're saying that letting a child, a young child, get on the internet or use a phone, and I'm saying people are children that don't even speak yet. This is the secular scientists are saying this is rewiring their brain. They're starting to think in a different way than what humans used to. I think it also affects us the more we use those things. These technologies that I just mentioned, the people who developed them had something in mind. And usually it is, I want as much money as I can get. And so they programmed them to actually influence us, or maybe more than influence us, to make us become addicted. And I'm really concerned about this. This stuff happens slowly, and maybe we don't realize what's happening, and the little bit of change that we see at first seems harmless. I'm really concerned about this, and I think we need to think deeply about this for ourselves. But also, this is one of those things that is making people more disconnected with others. They just look at their phone all the time instead. John Koblenz found a picture that I thought was so funny. It was a bunch of college students in a student lounge. So they're all sitting on couches and everything. They're all close to each other, and all of them have a phone in their hands, and they're looking at it. So they're not interacting with each other. And if they are, they're doing it through the phone. Now, it may not sound like a big thing, but I think it is. I think it is a lot more important than we often recognize. And I'd be glad to hear if you have something to say about that. Let me see. Oh, I think sometimes when we make a decision to allow something or to change something, we find it hard to recognize if it is harming us, and then we find it hard to change back. I want to tell a story that I hope all of us can take to heart and maybe practice this. The Bruderhof, those are Anabaptists. They have two Bruderhofs just south of Pittsburgh, and they own everything together. But they are Anabaptists. And I don't know if it was a family, but at least a man joined them from outside their circles. And on Saturdays, they dedicate Saturdays to family and community experiences. And he suggested, there's some good movies out there. Why don't we watch a movie once in a while? And the leaders said, well, show us one and we'll decide. So he got a hold of a movie that he knew wasn't bad. And the leadership looked at it and they said, well, this is okay. So they had for the family night, they watched that movie. I don't know what it was. But then after a while, someone said, are there other good movies? Could we watch other good movies? And so they went to this man, and he he came up with some others, and they started watching. I don't know how often. It's years ago that I talked to somebody about this, somebody in the Bruderhof, but something started to happen. Now, they didn't make the connection immediately, but their children started being mean to each other. I guess children can be mean to each other, but they were becoming more mean to each other. They were hitting each other and doing stuff they didn't usually do. And they would have meetings, and they were trying to decide what's happening. This is new. And somebody said, I think it started after we started watching movies. So what do you think they did? They decided, well, let's stop. Let's do an experiment. Let's stop and see what happens. And guess what happened when they stopped watching movies? Yeah, well, the problem went away. And so they actually changed that thing. We have a hard time doing that. I was really proud of them that they did that. But I think we have a hard time actually evaluating, is we made this change. Is it causing some problems? Anyway, I'm not saying we shouldn't have cell phones. I'm not saying we shouldn't have the internet. I am saying that I think they're more, what's the right word? They're more insidious. They're more harmful in a way you hardly recognize at first. And there are good ways to use them. I'm not saying they shouldn't be used, but I do think we should think about how those things are affecting us. And it's because of things like the internet, or the social media stuff. It's things like these new technologies, and how science is making it that we can. One of the things about human sexuality is people now who think they aren't what they were born can supposedly change because of this science or doctors can operate on them and give them drugs and things. This isn't reality. And so I think we've got to be careful that we don't let ourselves get pulled into things. We're probably not going to get into that, but let ourselves be pulled into the use of things that bring harm, and maybe it's slowly enough we don't even recognize it. So, do you have anything you would like to say? That's pretty much what I wanted to say.
What in your eyes, what do you see as the biggest reason there's so little desire to attend?
Well, probably part of it is. I'll tell you. I'll tell you something. I was talking to someone else. I think it might have been the first night. One of the things Anabaptists have traditionally tried to do is make limits that help us keep the church healthy and well, and the family healthy and well. And we come out of different places. The Old Order Amish, they don't think cars are evil, and they're not being hypocrites when a bunch of young people rent a van and get a driver and they go to a wedding in Iowa. That it's not the vehicle that's evil. What they're trying to do is maintain strong families and strong churches. So, and we think we can have cars and travel much more freely, and it won't harm us there. Maybe it has. I'm not saying we should go back to horse and buggy, because I have some really good New Order friends, and I've tried to drive buggy. Oh, it would really be dangerous if I were on the road in one of those things. When I get in my car, I just think, and the car turns when I think. I get in that buggy and I think, and that horse is thinking too, and he doesn't want to do what I think. So anyway, but I'm saying the things we decide on, they do have consequences. And so I'm not going to say we shouldn't have a car, but you know, the car does make it easier to do this and this and this and this. And then that's going to mean it's more likely I'm going to miss church. That's at least part of it. Anything else?
mentioned, the way the whole world is, or especially the Western world, sexuality and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Trump administration is really pushing back. How much effect or how long will that effect last?
It's political. What he's doing is political. It will last as long as people like him are in charge of the presidency. So that means when a Democrat wins, then it will happen. It'll all change. But so when you try to change things politically, things that are deep, if you loosen things, then that means people are going to do what they want to do. And that's what's happened in our culture. And I want to say a little bit about that in just a second. But politics is not where the answer is. It's winning people to Jesus. It's winning people to the church. It's helping them understand the truth, the reality of there is a human nature, things like that. Some of the people who are in his administration may be Christians and may think they're doing this for the right reason, but that is not where you bring healthy change. The government is to keep people restrained from doing evil, and it's supposed to encourage us to do good, but it's the church's job, really, to get people to change on the inside so that they want to do the good. And if you don't do that, the political effort to make people do good might last for a while, and it might do something, but it isn't doing anything in the heart. And when the next political party gets in, everything changes. That's what Mr. Trump is trying to do. He's trying to change things that the last two administrations changed. He's trying to change them in the other direction. But we need government, but we also need the church, and they do two different things. And the government is always something going back and forth like this. What brings real change and is changing people's hearts. So I don't think it's going to last. I don't. There was one thing I wanted to tell you. All of this change in our sexual morality started back in the 1800s when the country looked Christian, but some wealthy men wanted to be able to divorce their wives and get a new wife. And so the laws were changed. And over time, other laws were changed. And our whole view of sexuality was there were fewer restraints, and so people could do more or less what they wanted to do. And that's because the government took away its no, but it's also because a lot of those people weren't Christians really, and so they really wanted to do something else. If you really want a stable community and a stable morality, you've got to win people to the Lord. That's the only way it's going to happen. At least that's what I think. Anything else? Don't want it to take too long.
Along the lines of politics,
Mm-hmm.
I know from experience that when you politics, you can feel like the two sides are very divided.
Yeah.
You can start to feel like the other side is the enemy.
Yeah.
But there's in that sense, that's not a good thing. But also, we don't want to be ignorant really of what's going on.
No.
What is a good way of looking at politics, how to interact with that?
I don't want to put you on the spot, but I took it from what you said. You might have been pretty interested in it at some point and maybe participating. Maybe.
Just very involved in
Okay.
like having,
I was involved, And even after just for a little bit after I became beachy. See, my background's Catholic, and when Roe v. Wade happened, which said that abortion is just wide open, I got involved and I voted and I marched. And then when I became beachy, I still voted one more time and I marched at least one more time. And then I saw something. I saw several things. The president that I voted for, who said he was against abortion, was President Reagan. President Reagan also wanted to lower our taxes. He needed to ask the people to call their Democratic congressmen because there weren't enough Republicans in Congress. So he got on TV and he said, you've got to ask your Democratic congressman to vote for my tax bill. And people got on the phone, and the Democratic congressman voted for that bill. He never did anything like that for something much more important to abortion. He never did anything like that. He talked about it. He talked about how it's not good, but he never tried to get people to see his point. Well, I don't know if it was really his point, but anyway, to see the point that abortion is wrong and do something about it. So that's one thing I saw. Another thing I saw was I recognized, and this was from talking to people, that the non-Christian was really angry at somebody like me because I am trying to get the government to pass a law that fits my Christian view and that makes that person have to live a certain way, even though she isn't a Christian. And that wasn't just putting a wall between that person, and I'm thinking about a woman, and me. It was putting a wall between her and Jesus. Oh, you're one of those Christians. I don't like them. You're trying to make me do what you think people should do, but I'm not one of you. And so we should be aware. So that's not a bad thing. We should be aware, and we are called to pray for those. We're called to pay, to honor, to pray. And we should be informed so that we can do, especially the prayer part. I also think this is something that they didn't do back then. I think it's okay to write to a public official and ask him to consider something. I have done it once, and I made it very clear to him, I don't vote, I don't donate politically, I don't donate to any movement or party, but would you consider this? And I didn't even approach it from a religious perspective. Would you consider this philosophically? I think it's legitimate to do that because you're not putting any pressure on him. So I generally speaking, I would say we shouldn't vote. We shouldn't take part in politics. I do think when we could talk to these people and ask them to consider something that you think they might not have considered, like in the abortion issue. Isn't this really a human being? And you don't have to approach it from a religious perspective. You can approach it from a philosophical perspective. But I do think it's good to be aware what's happening so you can vote this way. You can talk to God about it. Thanks for that question. Anything else? Okay, I'm going to sit down and